So what are tutors looking for at interview? The first thing probably to note is that the interview is not the final filter. Here at Psychology, we very much take into account your full application when we're deciding whether or not to offer a place. So that means that the interview, of course, is important and contributes, but so does the rest of your application. So your grades at GCSE, at A level, your performance on the admissions test, your personal statement, any mitigating factors, all of it gets weighed into the decision making at the end. So that's probably worthwhile setting out in advance so that perhaps you can put this interview in a little bit of context and maybe it doesn't become this huge monstrous thing that is the final decision maker. That said, of course, interviews are important, and of course we value being able to interact with you and being able to see you in person or over video call, as may be the case, but to really do a little bit of better understanding what motivates you, but also of how you think and how you're able to work with new materials. In a way, interview is not that different from tutorials. So we go through a conversation, if you want. It's an intellectual conversation in which we try to urge you to think deeper. That happens in tutorial and that happens at interview. So oftentimes you'll be presented with something you've never seen before, which is kind of the idea. So we're not trying to get you to regurgitate any information. This is much more about how you think than about what you know. So in these kind of interviews, typically we'll provide you with some new information, a new experiment, some data, an explanation of a study, and we ask you to think about what that might mean. So we're trying to assess a little bit of your scientific thinking and your ability to update your views, because as in real science, so in teaching and interviewing, when you get presented with new information, this should allow you to update your theories and update your thinking and to take into account new evidence. So that's typically part of interviews. We've recorded a mock interview that we've done, and hopefully that might again give you a little bit more of an idea of what goes on at interview. I've also asked a few of the other tutors to please tell me what they're looking for in an interview, so I'm adding those videos to mine.
But what we're trying to really get a sense of is who you are. So we read your personal statement, and I'll probably ask you a question about something you've written in your personal statement. So try to make sure that the things you write about in your statement are things that you're interested in, things you can talk about. There's a couple of minutes of that, of trying to see what your interest in psychology is. And then we have a set questions that I will ask to all of the candidates who come for interview. Some in December, it's normally about 25 to 30 students that we're interviewing.
My name is Gaia Sherif. I'm Professor of Developmental Cognitive Neuroscience in the Department of Experimental Psychology. I'm also a college tutor at St. Catherine's College, OCATS. I'd like to start by saying that in interviews, what we definitely do not try and do is trip you up in any way. They are a very small chance for us all to try out what we do in tutorials every day when you're here studying at Oxford. In tutorials, we are interested in evaluating ideas and data. We're interested in gauging your enthusiasm about the topic, making you question some of the data, making you think about what future directions the field should take. So effectively train you to think critically, but also constructively about the next steps in psychological science. So in interviews, what we do is, what I always do at interviews is, first of all, put you at ease. This is not the end all and be all of everything you'll be doing here. Nobody's out to trip you up. Second, try and understand how enthusiastic you are in the discipline. If you don't as yet know what experimental psychology is, have you tried to find out what interests you more within the context of the discipline? There's no right or wrong answer to that point. It could be anything ranging from social psychology all the way to low-level neuroscience, to cognitive psychology, developmental psychology, and many of the other disciplines that we study while you're here. But key is enthusiasm and interest, and that's very much something I look out for in the context of an interview. I do not look for prior knowledge. We do not expect you to know everything before you come here. In fact, what we're really interested in is understanding how you respond to new information that we provide as part of the degree. And how do you revisit your thinking when that information turns out to be incomplete or to be questioned again? So often at interview, I will present a data question with data that is either sent in advance or presented to you during the interview. You don't need to know anything about it in advance, but I just like to hear people think about data, about alternative interpretations of data, about how the data are represented, what the data suggests should be done next, or what could have been done differently. So very much I look for critical thinking, evaluation that is data and evidence-based. But I'm also very interested in your hypothesis, your scientific thinking. What questions do you think should be asked next, given the information I give you? And how do you revisit them if I tell you that something else has emerged? So psychological questions, hypothesis are key to understanding the interview process. I really want to know how you think. Even if you don't know what the word hypothesis means, how do you think about questions? How do you pose them? For example, would you be able to think and design an experiment around a certain topic? Human memory, human attention, children's development, and so on and so forth. Data and methods, data analysis and methods are a key element of what we will eventually train you to do as part of the degree. So I'm also very interested in understanding how interested you are in data analysis and thinking about data, because that's a big important element of the course. But really, at the level of the interview, we're looking for potential. We're very well prepared to train you once you're here. But an important element is to understand if you're going to benefit from this kind of challenging, very intensive environment that questions you all the time, and of which you should ask questions all the time.
So our interviews are pretty structured, and we structure them in the same way that we'd structure a real undergraduate tutorial, actually. So we set you a series of exercises, and the aim is to assess some skills that we think would be important for you to thrive on our course. So three skills that I think are really important would be reading comprehension, numeracy, and flexibility of thought. So for reading comprehension, one thing that we do quite often in my college, not everybody does this, would be to give you a few minutes before the interview to read through a real article from a psychology journal and prepare answers to some questions about your comprehension of that article. So the kind of questions I might ask you to prepare answers to were, for example, what were the main hypotheses and conclusions of the experiments? What were the key pieces of evidence that support those conclusions? Was there any evidence that didn't support the conclusions? Why did the experimenters choose certain control conditions or conduct certain control experiments? And all of this information would be in the paper. So what I'm looking for is for you to be able to take that in, usually in quite a short time frame, and to express yourself clearly when you're explaining to me what was done in the paper and why. So I'm looking for someone who can give me a good, clear answer to the questions without being distracted by lots of tangential details or information. And I'm looking for you to avoid misunderstandings as well. In terms of numeracy, we might do a question based around a graph. So experimental psychology is a subject where we deal with a lot of data, and data are usually expressed in graphs. So I might give you a graph from a real or fictional experiment, explain to you what the experiment was about and how it was done, and ask you to show me on the graph what the key comparison would be. So say on a bar graph, which two bars have to be compared to test the question that the experiment was designed to address. I might also ask you just to talk me through a graph, describe what the main features of the graph are. Like, are there outliers? Are there differences between groups of people plotted on the graph? So yeah, a facility with graphs and being comfortable looking at data expressed in graphs would be probably one thing we would test. The third skill I mentioned is flexibility of thought. One of the fun things about psychology is that actually very little is known for sure, and often one experiment can overturn the findings of another experiment. So we might do an exercise where we present you with a real or fictional experiment and some conclusions that were drawn from it, and ask you to try and come up with some alternative explanations of the results that were found. And we might also present you with an alternative explanation that another researcher might have put, and then we'll work through together the process of designing a new experiment to test which of the two alternative explanations of the data would actually be correct. And what I'd be looking for in that kind of exercise of flexibility of thought is for you not just to get stuck on the original conclusion, but to think of other conclusions, to respond to new information that you're given and reinterpret your evaluation of the evidence in the light of new evidence. And I'd be impressed if you were creative in coming up with an experimental design, and I'd also be looking for you to understand the principles of experimental design to some extent. So do you have a control condition? What would be a good control condition for your fictional experiment, and so on. So those would be the three skills, and actually those three exercises would certainly fill up the 25 minutes of an interview. So that's pretty much what the interview is. It's a process of going through exercises with us. You don't have to come up with the answers straight off the bat yourself. Often good candidates are ones who don't get the answer initially, but respond really well to prompts and input from the interviewers. So if you can, please try and see it as a process of us working together to work out whether we could work together well.
Hi, my name's Nick Young. I'm a professor in the psychology department and also a tutor at University College. So in this video so far, you've heard lots of very useful information about how we run our admissions process and what we're looking for in interviews. So I thought I'd do in this video say actually a bit about what you should look for. And the context for that, the reason I want to talk about that is that if in around December, January time, on the basis of our interviews and the rest of your application and the test and your school grades, we decide to make you an offer to come to study psychology at Oxford. We know that you'll be choosing from among many offers from excellent universities with excellent psychology courses. And so I really want to persuade you that Oxford's a really good place for you to come, and that the interview is actually a really good way to find out if about that and find out about the way we teach and the way we engage in discussions. And so if we make you an offer in January and December, that means we really want you to come to study psychology here, that we're excited about what we can offer you in terms of our education, and we're excited about what you can offer us in terms of the talents and the enthusiasm that we all have seen through your application. And so I think, as well as the interview being for us an important way to, as you've seen, kind of see all of our candidates in the same way, that all the people who are applying to us, I think for you it's a really good opportunity to see something about the way Oxford teaches. So it's a bit of an unusual situation where you've got two tutors in a room asking you lots of questions, but in many ways, as you'll have seen in lots of these videos and you'll hear about more in open days and so on, that the interviews are really quite a lot like our tutorials. And so we think of them often as a mini tutorial, and we run them in that same way where we give you some information to think about and then we discuss it with you in depth. And so it's really a chance for you to get an experience, it's quite hard to come by, of what it's like to be an Oxford student and to sit and discuss with a tutor about an academic subject where we're both really, really interested and excited to discuss and find out what each other thinks and sort of work through our own ideas. So although the interview is obviously can be a bit stressful, it's really important for us that you enjoy it and that we see the best out of you in terms of your ability to kind of engage in discussion and have a fun, interesting conversation about topics that are really interesting to you and interesting to us. So although it's a bit of it can feel a bit stressful at times in the interview, we do our best to make people feel at ease and that they can enjoy the interview, show their best side and really engage in that discussion. And hopefully if you come to Oxford and have an interview, or if we're interviewing online, given the way the world is, if we have that interview and we have that discussion, it'll give you a taste of what it's like, and that you'll really want to more and to kind of come to Oxford and have that tutorial experience that we value so much, and that we'd be absolutely looking forward to sharing with you and having our education together.